Hi, my name is Olivia Carter, I'm 28, and I've always tried to live life on my own terms. Growing up in a family where everyone seemed to have a role but me, I learned early that my voice often got drowned out. I thought I was ready for the next chapter of my life, my pregnancy, but I never imagined that the first people I'd want to tell would betray me before I even could. It was a sunny Saturday morning when I walked into my parents' backyard for brunch, holding a small box of ultrasound photos. I wanted to tell them first, to share the joy in my own way. But the moment I stepped outside, my mom, Karen Carter, had already gathered our neighbors and family friends around, holding a homemade sign that read, "Olivia is having a baby. It's a boy." I froze. My heart raced, my hands shook. Not only had they stolen my moment, but they'd given away the gender, the one thing I wanted to share myself. My dad, Richard Carter, just stood there smiling, oblivious to my horror. My younger brother, Ethan, was giggling, clearly entertained by my humiliation. I couldn't breathe. All my plans, all my emotions, all my control. It felt like they'd been ripped from me in an instant. This was supposed to be my news, my joy, my sacred moment. And now, I wasn't even allowed to announce it myself. Something inside me snapped that day. I realized that if my own family could dismiss my feelings so easily, maybe it was time I started thinking about myself for once. Growing up, my life was always under the microscope of Karen's criticism and Richard's indifference. My mom had this way of making even small mistakes feel like disasters, and I spent most of my childhood tiptoeing around her moods. My younger brother, Ethan, on the other hand, seemed to get away with everything. He was charming, quick-witted, and the golden child in their eyes. Birthdays, school achievements, even casual family dinners. Nothing I did ever seemed enough for my mom. She had a particular fondness for highlighting my shortcomings while praising Ethan for things I did as well. It didn't matter if I stayed up all night to help Ethan with his homework or covered for him when he forgot his chores. Karen always found a way to make me feel invisible. My dad, Richard, wasn't cruel, but his detachment felt like silence that screamed louder than words. He rarely defended me, rarely intervened, and most of the time just followed Karen's lead, nodding along, as if my feelings were inconvenient background noise. Even in my teen years, when I first started confiding in him about my dreams, my ideas were met with polite nods but never genuine interest. Meanwhile, Ethan's smallest victories were celebrated with pride and attention. I learned that my family measured worth not by effort or heart, but by how well you fit their mold. By the time I became an adult, I had grown careful, controlled, and self-reliant. I learned to hide my vulnerabilities, because showing them only made me more of a target for dismissal. But nothing in my upbringing had prepared me for the ultimate betrayal, having my pregnancy and the gender of my baby announced before I had a chance to share it myself. It was the culmination of years of being unseen, unheard, and undervalued. And now, standing in my parents' backyard that Saturday morning, I realized that the person who needed to fight for me the most, me, was the one I had been ignoring all along. After that humiliating brunch, I tried to focus on keeping my life together. I was working as a junior editor at a publishing house in Denver, trying to make a name for myself. I wanted to be independent, strong, and capable, but my family's shadow loomed over every choice I made. I carefully planned how to tell them about my pregnancy myself, hoping for some acknowledgement of my feelings. I stayed late at work to save up for prenatal appointments, skipped dinners with friends to make sure I was financially stable, and even researched every detail to ensure a smooth pregnancy. Every step I took was to prove, to myself and to them, that I could handle this responsibly. But despite my efforts, every attempt to communicate or set boundaries was ignored. Karen would send texts asking, "When are you telling everyone? We should throw a party." As if she had the right to decide. Richard would casually drop comments about the baby's future, completely dismissing my input. And Ethan. He loved to chime in with unsolicited advice, treating me like a child who didn't know what she was doing. I began to notice a pattern. No matter how much I sacrificed, no matter how carefully I planned, my family's need for control always overrode my own voice. I felt like I was living in a cage, invisible yet constantly monitored. Every sleepless night I endured, Every anxious morning I faced felt meaningless in the shadow of their entitlement. The tension built quietly, like a storm gathering on the horizon. I told myself to be patient, to wait for the right moment. But deep down, I knew that one small misstep, or one more thoughtless act from them, could push me over the edge. That storm was coming, and I wasn't sure if I could endure it much longer. It happened just a few days after the backyard incident. I had finally mustered the courage to invite my parents over for a quiet private dinner so I could share my pregnancy news on my own terms. I carefully arranged everything: candles, a small cake, even a handwritten card revealing the gender in my own words. As soon as they arrived, Karen immediately started talking over me, bragging to the neighbors who had just come to pick up leftover invitations for some family party she had already started planning. "Did you hear, Olivia's having a boy? Isn't it exciting?" she gushed, smiling as if she had won some sort of victory. I felt my chest tighten, my throat burn. I tried to speak, to say something, anything, but my words were drowned out by her excitement and Richard's chuckle. Ethan, sitting in the corner, smirked knowingly, clearly entertained by my struggle to be heard. Then Karen leaned in and said something I'll never forget. "You know, Olivia, it's probably better this way. We all like to help you, since you can't seem to do anything on your own." That was it. Every ounce of patience, every attempt to assert myself, shattered in that moment. I grabbed my purse, walked to the front door, and left without looking back. The door slammed behind me, echoing like a drumbeat of finality. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what it felt like to be invisible in your own family, and I realized I could no longer tolerate it. That night, sitting alone in my car, I realized I couldn't go back. Not to the house, not to the people who had stolen my voice, and certainly not to the life that had always made me feel small. I made a decision. It was time to disappear and start over. Over the next few weeks, I quietly sold most of my belongings. I packed only what was essential, closed my bank accounts, and tied up loose ends at work without revealing my true plans. I left behind the city I had grown up in, the streets filled with memories of humiliation and betrayal, and set my sights on Austin, Texas, a place I knew no one. Starting over wasn't easy. I found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood and took a job at a local bookstore, the Willow Shelf, where the owner, Marissa Green, became one of the first people I felt safe confiding in. Slowly, I built a routine: morning walks, evenings filled with reading and journaling, and weekends connecting with new friends who were kind, patient, and genuinely interested in who I was. For the first time in years, I felt heard. I attended prenatal classes, decorated my tiny apartment with soft pastels for the baby, and even picked a name I loved: Samuel. Each day was a step away from the shadow of my past and closer to a life where I had agency, respect, and joy. I realized that disappearing wasn't about punishing my family. It was about survival. It was about carving out a space where I could breathe, make mistakes, and celebrate milestones on my own terms. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself. A few months into my new life, I started receiving messages from home. At first, they were subtle: gossip passed through mutual friends, half-hearted apologies from Ethan, and updates from Karen pretending to check in. But it didn't take long for the manipulations to become more pointed. Karen sent a text claiming she was not well and needed me to come home. Richard called repeatedly, using guilt-laden words about how worried they were for me and Samuel. Ethan's texts were filled with backhanded sympathy: "Wish you'd told us sooner. Maybe things wouldn't have gotten messy." I read them, felt a flicker of old anxiety, but I refused to respond. They tried to pull me back by creating scenarios I couldn't ignore: a supposed family emergency, rumors about me circulating at my workplace, even subtle threats about cutting me off financially if I didn't comply. Every message, every call, every plea was a test to see if I would break. But I didn't. I had rebuilt myself too carefully to let their control back in. I now understood my worth, my independence, and my right to choose peace over chaos. For every attempt they made to manipulate me, I became stronger, more resilient, and more certain that this life I built was mine and mine alone. The power I had once surrendered to my family, I had reclaimed it fully. And I knew that no apology, no guilt, and no pleading would ever make me return to a world where my voice didn't matter. Looking back now, I realized that leaving wasn't about abandoning my family. It was about saving myself. I didn't run because I hated them. I ran because I finally loved myself enough to protect my peace, my joy, and my unborn child. Samuel arrived on a quiet, beautiful morning, and holding him in my arms, I understood the true meaning of family. It isn't just blood, it's love, respect, and choice. My parents may have taught me lessons about control and disappointment, but they couldn't teach me what I discovered on my own. My voice matters, my boundaries matter, and my life belongs to me. I want anyone listening to know, choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Walking away from toxicity doesn't make you cruel. It makes you courageous. The path to self-respect may be lonely at first, but it leads to freedom, happiness, and empowerment. I've learned that the family who truly deserves your love is the one that lifts you up rather than diminishes you. And for me, that family includes me, Samuel, and the people I've chosen to surround myself with. Life is no longer about hiding, suppressing, or enduring. It's about thriving on my own terms. And for the first time, I feel like I truly belong in my own life.